Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to me talking about books, although this topic is also related to TV shows, movies, and basically any other type of media that involves fiction. Just noticed you can't even see my cool new shirt I put on for this. I'm starting to collect D&D shirts, and this is the newest one. Got the Bard, I got this one at a convention a couple of days ago, and I love it, so I wanted to show it off. In case you hear weird noises during this video, that's my dishwasher. It's still running in the background, so don't worry about that. So today's video is a totally non-scripted improvised rant, which, to be fair, describes basically 80% of my videos. But yeah, this is more of a spontaneous thing because it's about a topic that I've been thinking about for a while, but I didn't really see an opportunity to talk about it. And just recently, actually earlier today, I had a discussion about this again with my girlfriend because we watched a video where this kind of topic came up. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna rant about it a bit. And what I'm gonna talk about today is that I have a problem with more recent popular media like books, TV shows, movies, fictional, of course, and their depiction of, flawed characters or problematic characters or storylines, or rather, the lack thereof. So the catalyst for this was basically the new adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender that came out on Netflix a while ago. In case you want to hear my opinions about that, I ranted about that show for 3 hours, in case you want to hear me talk about it podcast style. And that show was sort of the catalyst for this discussion, because on that show, I had a huge problem with how some of the characters were adapted, because if you are familiar with the original cartoon, you know that some of the characters are protagonists. While they are, of course, likable and relatable people, they also have aspects to their characters or things they do throughout the show that could be labeled flawed, problematic, not a good thing. And those elements or actions are very important to their character and to their journey, to their character development, and are dealt with within the narrative, within the show. But in the Netflix TV show, they took many of those aspects, those like more flawed or problematic character aspects or storylines, and for the most part, like completely wrote them out of the show, so they are non-existent, or they like really mellowed them out so that now the characters are like basically bland. And this is a problem I've had with a lot of like media recently, like popular mainstream media, if we want to call it that there's sort of a general fear of letting characters be flawed, or more like let them be problematic, or let them do problematic things, or let them do things, or have them have flaws that could be seen as negative, that could be viewed by the audience as, oh, that is not a good thing. And I think that's a problem. Because I think that is not a this is not a step in the right direction. It's rather a step in the wrong direction, because if we take away those kinds of flaws or problematic behaviors, I think it makes many characters and their developments less interesting. Now, naturally, I'm talking here about flaws and problematic behavior or character aspects that are still understandable, still to a certain degree, I don't know, relatable, or, aspects that are addressed within the show. So I'm not, or the book or movie or whatever. So I'm talking about aspects and actions that are purposefully written into the story, into the narrative, into like the characterization of this particular person on purpose, and are dealt with within the narrative. Like, it's part of the narrative, part of the development. So I'm not talking about, I don't know, like some problematic behavior that's unintentionally there, but not dealt with within the narrative. So I'm talking about some stuff that's like actually there on purpose. So, for example, if we take the Avatar: Last Airbender show again, the most prominent example that we've heard people talk about is the character of Sokka. So Sokka is one of the male main protagonists of the show, and in the beginning of the show, he is very much sort of the cliche of a toxic, masculine, sexist teenage boy. So there are comments early on where he's like, fighting is boy stuff and cleaning, like doing the dishes and cleaning the clothes is girl stuff. Stuff like that. Or when he gets defeated by a girl, he's like, I couldn't have been defeated by you, you a girl. He says stuff like that. And within the original cartoon, they deal with that. They have Sokka learn that what he says, what he thinks about women is not okay. And he has a whole journey where he comes to realize that how his perception of girls is wrong, and there are many strong female characters that he meets throughout this journey that show him, hey, what you're doing, what you're saying and thinking is not right. And it's dealt with in the show. Like, the show acknowledges he has this problematic kind of behavior, that this is a problematic aspect of his character, and we are dealing with that. And he's gonna unlearn this problematic behavior. And in the Netflix show, they completely erased that because they were like some of the writers and the actors were like, we thought some of the sexist stuff that Sokka did in the original cartoon was kind of iffy, so we took that out of the show. And a lot of people, rightfully so, were upset about it because it is a big part of like who Sokka is in the original cartoon. It's a big part of his character development, especially early on in the show in book 1. And by just ignoring that or taking that out, you're ignoring a big part of his character, of his original development, what made him such an interesting character. Because, it shows growth, that he was willing to learn and unlearn his problematic behavior. And the Netflix show basically is just like, no, we don't want to offend anyone. This is kind of stuff that's, outdated and iffy. We're taking that out. And it's like completely missing the point. And they keep doing that. If we keep using this specific example of the Avatar show, they keep doing that. They keep changing little things that in the cartoon were meant to be like flaws of the characters, problematic actions. And in the Netflix show, they take them completely out and change them. Like, for example, in the original cartoon, Aang, upon learning that he's the Avatar and is supposed to be taken away from his mentor, he runs away. He abandons his responsibility and runs away, and then gets caught in the storm, and thus it's his fault that he was gone for 100 years. It was a mistake he made. It's something he has to deal with throughout the show. It's a mistake he made, and rightfully so, some characters are mad at him about it, because he basically abandoned the world for 100 years. In the Netflix show, Aang doesn't run away on purpose. He basically is just like, I'm gonna take a walk around the block, and then he accidentally ends up in a storm and gets lost and frozen. And again, it takes away this aspect of it tries to be, it's a flaw, that's a mistake he made, and that would be a really bad thing that would make him seem like dislikable, or would make him like maybe not as good to the viewer and other people. So let's not do that. They do the same thing with the third main character, with Katara, because Katara in the cartoon is, while she is very understanding, loving, and motherly, she's also very passionate, has very outgoing anger issues, and is outright jealous and steals because she wants to achieve her goal of becoming a good waterbender. And in the cartoon, she has outbursts of anger. She does some, to a certain degree, illegal shit to get her way, and sometimes is unable to control her emotions. And it's an aspect of her character that is interesting, that she has to learn to deal with, has to learn to a certain degree to overcome. And that's really great to see. That's what makes her such an interesting character, because she contains multitudes, essentially, as you say. And in the Netflix version, Katara is so bland and just flat as a person, because there is none of her passion, none of her anger. Like, Katara in the Netflix show never screams at anyone, never shouts at anyone, never shows that she basically has a big like a big mouth that she will tell you when she wants something, and she never does that in the Netflix show. Like she's turned into this like, you know, calm, collected, intellectual girl who's basically just standing around in the background for most of the time, not doing anything, because they took away her agency, like her emotional, passionate agency that she had in the cartoon. And it's stuff like that that not just in the Netflix Avatar show, but throughout other uh, narratives, basically, is something I keep seeing a lot. That there's always this fear of, oh, we're not trying to offend anyone, we're trying to keep this as family friendly, as level headed and basic and unproblematic as possible. Like, don't even try to like push the envelope. Like, just keep it here. Don't go anywhere here. Just keep it here in the middle. Hello, Editing John here. Actually, I forgot to name another example that was actually really important to me. Another example I think of this is the Sherlock Holmes character, because Sherlock Holmes, as we all know, in the original stories, is a sexist. Like, he makes several comments in regards to women that are problematic, and he has a whole story about that there is a great woman, Irene Adler, who teaches him basically that women are just as smart or even smarter than men. And that's basically what makes him think, maybe I have to like rethink some of the stuff I said. And this is an aspect of the character that I think not many people always know about when they watch newer adaptations. Like, recent adaptations of Sherlock Holmes always sort of ignore that part, don't address it at all. Like, the only more recent adaptation of this character flaw I know is that in one of the episodes of BBC Sherlock in the Christmas special, The Abominable Bride, they have that, but they give this flaw to Watson. Like, Watson is the one who makes derogatory, like casual derogatory comments towards women, and then Sherlock at the end is like, well, Watson, maybe you should have thought about the stuff you said and phrased it differently. And it makes Watson, because Watson is in many adaptations always made out to be like the fool, the buffoon, and that's sort of like a way to make him appear that way. That he's again like the sort of the idiot, and Sherlock Holmes stays this, you know, he's above everyone. He's like so super smart, ahead of the curve, and he's so modern and bohemian. Like, he would never say stuff like that. And Watson says stuff like that, but Sherlock is like, yeah, Watson, you need to think about it. Like, that's the only instance of this in more recent adaptations where this comes up, and then they get it wrong, because in the books Watson calls out Sherlock on his sexist shit. And that's like another famous character who has this very obvious flaw that is dealt with within the story, and yet a lot of adaptations simply forget about it. And then it wouldn't surprise me if people then pick up the books and read the stories and then are like, holy shit, Sherlock Holmes is like a massive sexist. And then you're like, yeah, of course he is. Adaptations just kind of keep ignoring that. And I can understand that to a certain degree. You know, of course you shouldn't on purpose maybe offend people in a particular way, you know what I mean. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give your characters flaws, and they shouldn't sometimes commit mistakes. That sometimes, yes, they do some problematic stuff sometimes. Again, naturally, I'm talking about, problematic stuff that is still somewhat, understandable and redeemable, I guess. But I feel like that this is like a development we're seeing, where as soon as there's like something mildly problematic or flawed within a narration, some people are like really quick to point it out and are like, oh, how dare you put this in there, and this is offensive, and they completely ignore like the context of the narration, that in many stories that's the whole point of the story, that you talk about this problematic stuff, or that you talk about that flaw the character has. Like, that's the whole point. And I feel like there's a development where people are just trying to be like, oh, you can't talk about that because it's offensive. You can't include this because it's problematic. You can't include this because it's taboo. Like, as soon as you include it, regardless in which way you deal with it, it's bad and it's forbidden. And I feel like that's not a good thing, because we should be allowed to explore flaws and problematic issues within our stories and within our characters, because how else are we gonna like understand society? How else are we gonna explore, the human mind, human nature? Because humans do problematic shit. Humans are flawed, very much flawed beings. And if we just sanitize everything within our fiction, it gets very, very, very boring. And I think what a lot of people, and actually generally speaking here, I think what a lot of people have to understand, especially about like characters, is that a character does not have to be likable to you in order to be a good character. Good character does not equal likable. And I think that's a big thing a lot of people have to understand, because there are characters that are very much problematic. They're horrible people, and they are still good characters because they are well written, because they're complex, because they're interesting to talk about, because the narration basically does like a character study of a person. Best example is one of my favorite movies. I have many favorite movies, but one of my favorite movies starring James McAvoy is the movie Filth. And in it, James McAvoy plays the most horrible human being that you can possibly imagine. Like, he plays a Scottish policeman who is racist, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, generally an awful human being. He's not likable at all. But what this movie does is it's basically an interesting character study of this very broken, sad, and pathetic person. And within the narration, at no point are you like, oh, am I supposed to like him? He's not very likable. This is stupid. At no point is that supposed to be the whole point of the movie. It's just meant to be an character study of this interesting person who displays elements of human nature that we should talk about, like toxic masculinity at the workplace, for example, or just, it just has aspects of it where you're like, the movie is not trying to be like, we excuse this behavior because he's our protagonist and he has to be likable, and that what would make him an interesting or likable character, or was making him a good character. No, he's dislikable, he's despicable, he's an utterly despicable human being, but he's still a good character because he's written in an interesting way, because he contains multitudes. There are many different aspects to his characters. And I think that this is something we have to relearn again, that just because a character does something bad, just because a character maybe does something you don't agree with, naturally there are different levels here of what is considered to be still, redeemable or not as bad as other things. Of course, there are levels, and there's a spectrum. But I think generally speaking, you know what I mean. Like that, I think we have to accept that, characters can be not always be morally good. They don't always have to be morally the best person in the room. They don't always have to do the right thing every single time. They don't always have to do what you personally would do in that situation. Sometimes characters just do things where you're like, I wouldn't do that. Where you're like, oh, this is I don't know, if you were in an RPG, you would be like, this is like the evil dialogue option or something. Sometimes characters and stories be like that, and we have to accept that. If it's within the narration, dealt with. If it's an aspect of, for example, the character that is the whole focus of the story, like if a character is, for example, sexist or something, or homophobic, and then the narration deals with that, like that's the whole point. If the narration deals with that, then that's the whole point of the story. And then you can't be like, oh, this is like iffy and we shouldn't talk about it. But you're like, that's the whole point of the story, that the character is like this and then unlearns that behavior. Like in the case of soccer, what I told you earlier. And I think this is just a development I keep seeing, that in mainstream media, like writers are trying to be very careful with what they include, but they're always trying to play it safe, which I don't think is always the like the right thing to do or the most entertaining or interesting thing to do, because we do still need stories about, I don't know, bad people or problematic characters. Of course, naturally, we should always also have stories about the other people. Like, I totally understand, if we talk about true crime, for example, of course, like, there are way too many stories about, focusing on the killer, about the serial killer, what they did and what their mentality was. And there are not enough stories about, the victims. I agree that, of course, we need more stories in that case about these people instead of these people who were way ahead enough. Of course, we still need that. I'm just saying that we can't just stop making stories about, stuff that makes us uncomfortable or stuff that we don't want to see. Naturally, there is stuff you don't want to engage with, and that's your choice. You don't have to expose yourself to certain things that make you uncomfortable. Naturally, that's your personal choice. But you can't really, I feel like you can't say no to other people who then want to engage with, I don't know, problematic stories or something. Like, for example, a recent movie I enjoyed a lot. A lot of people watched it, Oppenheimer. And one of the major arguments I saw that people made was like, why are we making a movie about the guy who invented the atomic bomb and killed millions and millions of people? Like, that's so evil and problematic, and we shouldn't talk about people like that, and we should talk more about the people who were impacted, bad choice of words, by the bomb. And I'm like, yes, I agree. We should also have stories about, the people this awful stuff happened to, the victims of those bombings. But at the same time, I don't think it's unimportant to have stories about the people behind the awful thing, because it's a part of our history. It's part of humanity, and we can't just keep erasing that stuff, like, and sanitize it, because that would falsify history, that would falsify humanity, that would falsify who we are, what we do. Like, I understand there are points and moments where you're like, okay, we don't need this, we don't need the bad, we don't need the negative, we don't need the problematic, we want to talk about the other stuff, the good stuff, the stuff that hasn't been represented enough. And like I said, true, it's important, we also need stuff like that. But at the same time, I think we shouldn't like completely ignore that other stuff in the background, because humans are flawed, we do bad shit, and not everyone always does the right thing. That wouldn't just be realistic if a character always did the morally correct thing. And I just think that we should start to like think more about, how are certain things depicted in media. Like, just because a character has a flaw, does something flawed, does something problematic, does that automatically mean the show is bad or the book is bad? Does it automatically make the person or the character dislikable? Like, just because, this is a classic discussion thing, like, just because a story includes a bad thing doesn't necessarily mean the story and the author support the bad thing. That's not, no, I think we can agree that's not how this works in most cases, naturally. And I just think we need to sort of come back to that thinking, and we need to allow writers and other creators to explore elements and characteristics that are maybe not always morally good, that are maybe problematic. Because otherwise we're sanitizing the whole like media and cultural experience. We're ignoring what society and humanity is like as a whole, and we would just create really bland and boring stories that no one wants to read or see. So yeah, this was me just ranting to the camera about this very specific topic. I hope it made sense. If it did, good. Why not give it a thumbs up if you liked it? And if you have any thoughts or opinions on this topic, please do tell me down in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. This is a topic I find very interesting, and I would love to maybe hear some other opinions on this issue. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see all of you next time. Goodbye.